On Exactitude in Science is a one-paragraph short story written in 1946 by Jorge Luis Borges about the map-territory relation, written in the form of a literary forgery. The Borges story imagines an empire where the science of cartography becomes so exact that only a map on the same scale as the empire itself will suffice. Succeeding generations came to judge a map of such magnitude cumbersome. In the western deserts, tattered fragments of the map are still to be found, sheltering an occasional beast or beggar. So here's the one-paragraph story. In that empire, the art of cartography attained such perfection that the map of a single province occupied the entirety of a city, and the map of the empire, the entirety of a province. In time, those unconscionable maps no longer satisfied, and the cartographers' guilds struck a map of the empire whose size was that of the empire, and which coincided point for point with it. The following generations, who were not so fond of the study of cartography as their forebears had been, saw that that vast map was useless, and not without some pitilessness was it that they delivered it up to the inclemencies of sun and winters. In the deserts of the West, still today, there are tattered ruins of that map, inhabited by animals and beggars. In all the land, there is no other relic of the disciplines of geography. That story, that's the end of the story, elaborates on a concept in an earlier story in Lewis Carroll's Sylvie and Bruno Concluded from 1889, a fictional map that had the scale of a mile to the mile. One of Carroll's characters notes some practical difficulties with this map. What a useful thing a pocket map is, I remarked. That's another thing we've learned from your nation, said Mein Herr. Map making. But we've carried it much further than you. What do you consider the largest map that would be really useful? About 6 inches to the mile. Only 6 inches, exclaimed Mein Herr. We very soon got to 6 yards to the mile. Then we tried 100 yards to the mile, and then came the grandest idea of all. We actually made a map of the country on the scale of a mile to the mile. Have you used it much? I inquired. It has never been spread out yet, said Mein Herr. The farmers objected. They said it would cover the whole country and shut out the sunlight. So we now use the country itself as its own map, and I assure you it does nearly as well. From Lewis Carroll, Sylvie and Bruno Concluded, Chapter 11, London, 1895. This is my first podcast ever, and I'm glad to be here with my guest, Simon Dilhas. Welcome, Simon.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Likewise, thank you so much for accepting. I thought today's talk could be titled, What is it like to work in architecture, engineering, and construction firms these days? Of course, it is important to study our professions, to examine and reflect on them. So let's do that. It should be easy. Just one more remark first. There is a book from 1911 by German philosopher Hans Weichinger. It's called The Philosophy of As If. The title refers to the necessity to treat things as if they are true. Here are just two sentences from the book, from chapter 1. Thought, considered in terms of its purpose. Thought has fulfilled its purpose when it has changed and elaborated what we perceive into valid concepts, general judgments, and cogent conclusions, and has produced such a world that objective happenings can be calculated and our behavior successfully carried out. And later, it must be remembered that the objective is not the portrayal of reality. This would be an utterly impossible task, but rather to provide us with an instrument for finding our way about more easily in the world. So, Simon, does this prompt any thoughts for you? And
yeah,
yes,
quite a lot, quite a lot. I mean, we all cover the same topic, and yeah, you started with citing some books, and let me cite somebody as well. So I really liked George Box. He's a statistician. I don't know how you to say, a mathematician.
statistician.
Thank you. And he says all models are wrong, but some are useful. And I mean, what is a map? It's a model of the world.
Yeah.
And when the model doesn't have any level of abstraction, where's the usefulness?
Yes.
It's always covering the same topic. And I mean, when you worked as an architect as well, Rob.
Yes.
So when you draw, you model the world.
Yes.
And you frame it in some way so that you can, think better.
Yes. This would be the objective, to think better somehow. And yet we get caught up in modeling the entire universe, and somehow it pulls us in another direction away from. We end up in this where we're heading towards a map of a mile to the mile scale.
Exactly. Yeah. And it happens because we forget about the usefulness. So
Yeah.
it's a question, why shall we model? What do we want to achieve? And when we don't know it, or when we can't answer it, well,
Yes.
maybe we shouldn't model.
Yeah, or is maybe we're modeling, but what else should we be doing? That's a kind of thought of asking it in this way. Simon, what is it like to work in architecture, engineering, and construction firms today? What kinds of work do people do? People who work in AEC, what kinds of work do they undertake? What are they responsible for? What do they have to get right?
Oh, that's a tough question for me because actually I left construction industry behind somehow. I mean, I studied architecture, I worked as an architect, I worked as a client rep, I worked as a project manager, I worked as BIM manager, but now for almost, what is it, 3 years, 4 years, I don't really work on projects anymore. So everything I know about working in projects in the construction industry is old know-how or old knowledge. But what I hear when I talk to people and what I see when I support companies working in construction industry is that it's a huge struggle with all these new requirements. So in former times it was enough to be a good architect, a good engineer, to know how to calculate. And if by accident you were good with people, you got promoted.
Yeah.
And now you have to have these digital skills as well. So I think it's 1/3 actual know-how, 1/3 soft skills, so being good with people, and 1/3 having these digital skills to know how to work with this, I call it the employee algorithm. So this guy sitting in the computer and doing this work very quickly for you, if you are able to tell him what he should do. So
Yeah. I thought of actually, well, it's another two-part question then. it touches on the people skills and these tools. So a lot of people talk about how software is a big help, and you can hardly turn around for the last 20 years without bumping into people telling you how, and I was one for a long time, right? How software solves this or that and makes you super awesome. So let's maybe not add to that. We can later in this conversation or not, but I want to ask you, how does software get in the way and interfere with what people have to get right? And how does it become a burden that drains time and attention from real objectives?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think software can help us to become more efficient, but it doesn't help us to get more effective. And first we have to know what is effective. So we have to do the right things. And when we can do the things right, so becoming more efficient. And software can't tell us what the right things are. And even now with the developments of artificial intelligence or machine learning, we're still not there where software tells us what are the goals, what shall we achieve. And most projects I worked in, way fails because unclear client requirements or unclear goals, changing goals, this requirement creep. And this is not a topic where software can support us. This is a topic for human skills, for project management skills. And I think a lot of the problems we are facing is because we try to force software doing stuff it can't do. Does it make sense what I'm saying to you?
Yes, I've read some of your writings on this topic in your workshops. How do you guide teams to think about how to work together? What changes have you seen in people as they've gone through your workshops? And I'd like to frame it though in the sense that maybe we could break this into two halves. Addressing what you just said, sometimes there's a lot of uncertainty from the client, but put that aside. Let's say the client is perfectly clear and gives a completely clear and thorough program, and you take it from there. Well, then what happens? Because the resolution of those requirements has to evolve through a process. So, and I read your writing about how you teach people, teams to work through these.
Yeah, so when I teach, I like to let people fail and then help them to get out of it. So this is always my strategy. So, for example, I let them say, okay, this is the client, he kicked out the old architect, you are the new team, you just got the job because you promised the client you can deliver in 3 weeks. Start. And when people start and we really emulate very nicely how we work in reality. So it's chaotic at the beginning, nobody wants to take the lead, no moderation, nothing. So yeah, and when at one point we're so desperate and don't know how to solve it anymore, and when we turn the time back and look, okay, how do you start a meeting? How do you make sure that everybody is on the same page? And yeah, how do you enter the room so that you as a project manager get the attention of the people? How do you talk to the client to really understand what he needs? So, because yeah, you said client, let's imagine the client knows exactly what he wants and communicates it clearly. I've never seen this. So as a client, it's, you know what you want, you have wishes, but when transferring these wishes to requirements and to solutions, that's job of the planner team.
You mentioned 3 weeks. This would be for like an initial conceptual presentation?
No. So the setting is, it's yeah, six flats in one building, so normal building. When I ask the people, normally we would need six months for it. But what I like to do is make it really impossible to solve. So that we really have to think, what do we have to change in our approach to make it work?
Okay.
So taking out resources, forcing people to think and to change something, getting rid of all the clutter, all the unnecessary work, really focusing on the most important thing. So basically, it's this idea of that planning is like a gas. It will always fill out the space you give it.
Yeah. So how do you do that? Get them to focus and take away what's unimportant?
Yeah, through moderation, really asking the right questions at the right time. So first asking these open-ended questions to get to know the client requirements, part one. And then the second part is to do rapid prototyping. So instead of me as an architect, I go back home in the office and draw a beautiful plan. I let them work in parallel. So the architect is taking care about the floor plan organization and urban design. So where to place the building on the plot. The structural engineer takes care about the structural concept, and not in the sense like doing a project, but in the sense of exploring the solution space. So I like to work with the morphological box, it's called. So it's a grid basically, where you say, okay, on the one side you have different topics. So the structural concept, it could be the structure could be made out of wood, it could be a concrete structure, it could be laminated wood, laminated timber, and all these solutions. And because we talked up front with the client, we know what's important for them. So we already have a lot of decision criteria. And all the people who are in my classes were professionals. We have a lot of experience. And so tapping into the know-how, we can come up with very good recommendations. And at the end, I don't know, 1-2 hours, we have this huge morphological box with a lot of topics. And we have a recommendation, okay, you should build a building with 6 or 7 flats here on the plot. It should have a shape like this and structure like that. And the heating system should be central heating. I don't know. I'm making stuff up here.
Yeah.
Because we know what the client wants, we know the wishes, and because we are professionals, we can conceptualize a building very important. And with this, we can go to the client and say, look, we thought about this, and because of this and that reason, we recommend but the building should look like that. And yeah, I usually have professional clients in my classes as well, and they are amazed because we never get such a good foundation for taking decisions. So we're not used to this, but we love it.
That's what they say.
That's what we say, yes.
Let me ask you then, backing up to the beginning of that story, you said that you help people make clear that they understand what the client wants.
Yes.
You find that it's a common situation that people assume that they know, or they think they know what the client. Is it a case of it's not what you don't know that gets you, it's what you know for sure that's wrong? So they think they know what the client wants, but they're off target. Does that often happen?
Yeah, this could happen, or it's, yeah, we're waiting. We don't do anything. We don't draw anything till the client tells us what he wants. And the client expects, I mean, the client is hiring a professional. He wants suggestions. He wants the other person to help him through this process, because often the client is not a specialist. So it's really both. It's waiting for the client, and it's, yeah, assuming to know what the client wants. So it's a double, two blind spots.
Yes. It reminds me of personal relationships in general.
Yes. It's a little bit like therapy, yes.
Yeah. Which is a lifetime, right? It's a lifetime of this, learning to do this better, and professionally as well. So let me. It just pops into mind my pet peeve, my constant obsession. Well, my work in architecture goes back, my separation from actual architectural work is much longer than your 3 years. I started I finished architecture school in '96. While I was a student, I was working in an architecture office in the same town where I went to university. So nights and weekends doing construction drawings.
Like every architect, or every architect student, I guess.
Yes, exactly. I mean, we all seem to be alike. I've noticed this. Then I found out about this 3D thing. There was this program out of Belgium that I accidentally found out about, and it was a surprise to me. This was in '96. Yeah, the first year I was out of school. It was called this Triforma. It was this predecessor to Bricks, BIM. So that was in the mid '90s, and I got really fascinated by that. So right away, early in my work life, I started getting. I was at the same time trying to get better at actually doing my job, like understanding the client's program, offering solutions, designing. So I even pretty early had the responsibility to handle some small projects pretty much on my own. I guess I rose to the occasion. I still like those. I think those were interesting. The client was happy anyway with the outcome, but you're always fighting this fear that you don't know what you're doing, but then it kind of looks like you do. So maybe you do. But after a couple of successful projects, I found myself simultaneously getting really drawn heavily into these tools.
Mhm.
I really went down that path hard. I went to one firm and then another, kind of because of this kind of expertise in these tools. And we were building these digital models. This is now 98, 99, 2000, building these models and using them to drive these automated drawing graphics, BIM before it was called BIM.
Yeah.
Yeah, to some extent, right? I mean, put all the caveats, as I'm sure if anyone listens to this podcast, they'll be jumping up and down screaming, no, that wasn't BIM. You weren't doing it right. All I'm saying is we built very elaborate, very detailed 3D models, and they drove very complete sets of construction drawings. And we really knocked ourselves out trying to do that, especially because the software was always broken. And so it was interesting, and that was before the year 2000. And then, well, I'm rambling, but I wanted to. It made me realize later, continuing working in different firms, a large firm, international firm, then my own firm. You are drawn, if you go down this path that many of us do, where we get really absorbed in these modeling tools, it draws you away from, I mean, you put many, 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 many hours into learning how to push these buttons and do these things, right? And those are hours and weeks and months and years that are drawn away from the knowledge of building. Yeah.
But you know about Renaissance artists, Brunelleschi and so on. They not only designed these beautiful buildings, they designed their tools as well.
Mm.
And I think it's the same with digital tools. You're just accepting the tool as it is. Yes, you can do it, but I like to hack the tool and to make it work for me.
Yes. I mean, I understand that, right? I worked for many years, sort of elaborating that. Just a kind of became, well, more than a strong interest. Yeah. But I still keep thinking, I don't know how to put this in the form of a question, but maybe it is. In former times, before we had software and computers, you would work in this profession, and this is kind of before my time now, so I'm just imagining. But as a student, we used pencils and paper, and you would be using your mind and your hand and a pencil. And there's not much, you're not going to go design your own pencil, really. You might sharpen it. But
yeah, it's reduced to the max. It's a very good tool.
The work's going on in your mind. Maybe you're making little physical models and such, and your drawings. And yeah, I don't know. There's something about, to be honest, I think there's something missing in our digital tools. They, over the last 20, 25 years, they've gotten more and more and more and more effective at creating models, generating models, letting you, sort of say, what should be modeled or otherwise, capturing things with cameras and scanners and then developing those, or of course, grasshopper type generative systems.
Super complicated. All the tools we're using are super complicated.
They are.
I like it what you said. Yeah, the pencil. It's perfect. There's no distraction, but most of the tools we are using, there are a lot of buttons, and you need to know which button to press in which order to achieve things. Maybe you even need to program a little bit more. or to get these things done.
Yes.
There's so much distraction from doing the work.
Yes, and as we're doing this, as you know, a self-proclaimed evangelist of these tools myself back in the day, I would find myself in the office after midnight, night after night after night, bashing my head against these tools and saying, well, these tools were supposed to automate this and that and make everything, I could show and tell more and make things more clear for people who need to see it, and so that decisions can happen, and all of this will become more efficient and effective, and but then you of course you have to put in so much effort into dealing with the idiosyncrasies of these tools that you start to ask yourself the question, and you're like, should I admit this? Should I say this out loud? Should I tell anyone, even my friends in the office, what's really going on? This is a nightmare, right?
Yeah.
I often felt that.
But maybe, or I have a theory why it is like this. Right. Number one, we are engineers, so we like it complicated somehow because it's good for our ego when we know which buttons to press.
Yeah.
So if it would be simple, it can't be good. For example, I love to work with SketchUp because it's very simple.
Yep.
But a lot of my colleagues, laugh and say, SketchUp, it's not a real program. You can't work with it. Yes, you can, but you have to know how. So number one, and number two, I think we approach it in a wrong way, the drawing. So what I mean is we have to draw the walls to define the space. But actually what we want to define is the space. And now with digital tools, it would be or we could create the space right away. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, so you, instead of having to draw every wall as an element, you can have those, okay, spawn
right away work on the space, because this is what the client wants.
Yeah.
And I mean, the wall, it's just a function of the space. It's
we get into this after many years of modeling and really being in this love-hate relationship with the models and the modeling tools, the software, because they're just so compelling. They draw you in. You get so sucked into them. And
it strokes your ego as
that too.
This guy who knows how to handle them, right?
Yes, and then you can fly around and spin them around, and I don't know. But what happens is, after doing that for a while, you start to notice that it doesn't take very long when it's a question of the degree of complexity of the model, which within, when you get to a certain phase in the project where now you have to really articulate all of the components of the model and their assembly, it doesn't take very long, just a matter of days. And the model complexity sort of exceeds your grasp, your cognitive grasp.
Mm-hmm.
It gets to be more than you can digest in your mind. It runs out beyond your ability to answer the simplest questions about it. And I'm talking about just the model by itself, let's say, without any kind of engagement interface to it. Like you probably know where I'm going. The drawing is a kind of interface. It's a way of engaging with the model. Each technical drawing, detail, plan, section, whatever, is
a higher level of abstraction. It helps.
It's a higher level of abstraction. It's very abstract, and it's not real, right? It's symbolic, and it its function is to narrow your focus, because like a telescope, we have the entire universe, the entire cosmos that we can see in the night sky, say. But we need a telescope, some kind of lens to narrow our focus and sharpen our attention. And that is the function of drawing. And that's how we engage these complex models and build up an understanding of them over time. And that understanding, it also, it's also, so we can see what we're doing and understand it beyond the superficial level of understanding a model that you get just from flying around it. And along with that, we can answer certain, like, very basic questions, like, is it done yet? Like, is this model good enough yet?
Can you produce from it? Which kind of flow material? I mean,
yeah.
These are interesting questions to ask a model.
Yeah, and you ask it constantly all along the way. Is it good? And the answer is never an absolute. It's not the model is good enough now, yes or no. It's good enough in some areas and not in others. And I need to be able to recognize the difference.
Yes.
Yeah.
And actually, that's one of the problems, I think, with the computer graphics. When you draw by hand, the line is a little bit shaky, and you see, okay, here you didn't think completely, or you use a thicker pen. But when you model something on the computer, it looks perfect right away. So no matter if you did think about it or not, it looks perfect. And the moment it looks perfect, people start or stop thinking.
So easy to stop thinking. It seems like the older I get, the more I notice that people are, if there's any opportunity to stop thinking, they take it.
Yeah, we are lazy. Exactly.
Yes. Yeah, there's another distinction too in what you mentioned when you're drawing, and it's when you look at a sketch drawing, you can tell it's not final. It's what's the word? It's tentative. It's tentative. Yeah, and until you declare that it's it's to be used.
And it leaves some space for imagination. So where some blanks, and me as when I look at the model or at the drawing, I have to fill in the blanks.
Exactly. You have you're using those sketches and drawings, and they maybe you carry those drawings into like sharp, they're like complete technical drawings. They're no longer sketches. You use those to build a mental model.
Yes.
And you know what? That mental model, you're building that even if you have a Grasshopper model, a Revit model. No matter what degree of digital modeling you have, that's not doing anything unless you are, once again, building a mental model. Because otherwise, nothing is happening.
Yeah. This reminds me, a cousin of mine, he studied IT and programming. And he told me in the first semester, they had to write all their code by hand. So to really understand the concept and not get distracted with all this clutter. So even the IT guys know this somehow.
Yeah. I've noticed this kind of thing too, and that's why, it was just by accident today I found this this book from 112 years ago by Hans Vaihinger.
I never heard about it.
Me neither. Just accidentally, just a few hours ago, came across it, and you know, when he says that it must be remembered that the objective is not the portrayal of reality. This would be an utterly impossible task. And to me, that resonates with, you know, I just can't hold that much in my mind at one time. There are limits to what I can hold in the memory, right? And grasp, but rather to provide us with an instrument for finding our way about more easily in the world. You know, and I think this is, we've had 25, 30 years of tremendous innovation and development on all aspects of digital modeling, but we've had automation. You know, there's the only thing that's happened on this instrument for finding our way about, which is the whole legacy of technical drawing. That's actually its function. It helps us build this dynamic engagement interplay in our minds between narrowed attentive focus and the wider environmental modeled whole universe of the project. And it's in that interplay where we're actually thinking and learning and understanding and refining our conception of the thing. But that second half of this puzzle, this attentive, narrowed focus, there's been very little software innovation on that area. We've been putting all of the energy into the modeling side and not enough on this lens for looking at the models, other than a bit of automation. Yeah,
I definitely agree. And there's this misconception of, the more you put into the model, the better the model is. And you stop thinking about how can the other person understand and listen to what the model has to say. I mean,
exactly.
You mentioned relationships. It's not about what I say. It's about what you hear from what I'm saying.
That's right. That's right.
And it's exactly the same with the model.
It is. I think this is a frontier that hopefully some smart people will open. Maybe you and I can help open this, right?
Actually, this is what moderation is about. This is you're framing things, you're helping people to understand, to get out of their usual way of thinking, to see things differently, to ask the right questions.
And not to use a map of the empire that is the scale of the empire.
Yes, exactly. Recently somebody commented in one of my posts here, if you want to understand the economic performance of a company, you don't look at all the spreadsheets and all the raw data. You look at a yearly report where it's summarized. And yes, you do need the raw data.
Right.
But to send it to the machine, to cut the wood, whatever.
Yep.
But you need this higher level of abstraction as well.
Yep. They are like yin and yang, right? They're one unity. You can't drop one out and say, "No, we don't need that because we have everything." Oh, well, having everything, let's say you have this world's greatest team who builds the best models that anyone has ever seen, and they have everything. Okay, but then what? Right. Yeah. How do I understand that? How do I grasp it and interpret what kind of tools do I have within that model to help me get into it and understand what it is?
Yeah, and I think the more we work with data and the more we enrich the models with data, the more we have to find answers on these questions.
Yes. I never want to be this guy who says, "Oh, you're enriching your models too far." I mean, I was that guy, right? And I respect anyone who's doing that, right? But it's not enough. Yeah, we need this other thing too.
Yeah, I remember I had this client and we worked on this BIM element plan. So what does he have to order from the planners so that he can work? And it was a really abstract topic for him, and he didn't know a lot about BIM. And then one day I showed him a BIM collab Zoom. Just make a rule, a smart view, double click on it, and then you see everything what is new in green and everything what is old in gray.
Yeah.
And then suddenly he said, Simon, now I understand why we are doing this exercise. This
Excellent.
actually helps me.
Yes. That's it. That's that extra piece. Been a real fan of reading what you write about your workshops and how you get people to see the way to a better process.
What popped into my mind is, I mean, we called our company Abstract, and today we talked a lot about abstraction and a higher level of abstraction and
Yeah.
so on. And so I think it's not by accident that we have this conversation today.
Yeah.
And I'm Googling definition of abstract at the moment. Yeah, and there are a lot of different meanings. So only existing as an idea without any physical or concrete existence. But on the other side, it's a summary of the content of a book, an article. So it always has this double meaning. And I think we use abstract in our communication during this podcast. We talked about both aspects as well.
Yes. And the relationship between them. Yeah,
Yeah.
the actual
Yeah.
reality, whatever that is, and who knows, right? Nobody.
Yeah, or abstraction is extracting something, removing something, making it clear. And yeah, this is what you're doing when you're looking at a model to make it useful. This is what I'm doing when I'm moderating a workshop.
Yeah, I see. And I also Googled the word abstract, and I see definition number 2 seems apt, relating to art that does not attempt to represent external reality, but rather seeks to achieve its effect.
Yeah.
Using and so on. Well, it doesn't matter, but yeah, there's a distinction between reality as it actually is, which is kind of where everyone's efforts on modeling, there seems to be, I don't want to presume to know what people are thinking when they're elaborating and even over elaborating models, but it looks like they're attempting to simulate reality. And that's great, but it's not enough. We need this abstraction as well. And that the abstraction, the quality and the compelling effect of the abstraction has to keep up with the pace of the development of these reality models.
Yes, and we have to be useful. We want to achieve something with the models. So,
Yes.
and I think the big art is to achieve something with as little effort as possible. And I see this when I talk to cost calculators or quantity surveyors on the one side and BIM people on the other side. The BIM people always believe, yeah, you have to model every screw, everything, so that quantity surveyor can calculate the costs of a project. But that's not true. He can use very little input data, and that's enough. Because
Indeed.
of his experience, he doesn't have to see every screw.
Right.
And yeah, achieving a lot with minimal effort. This is maybe something what we could do better with BIM, or where a lot of people struggle at the moment when working with the computer. Maybe because we get overwhelmed by all these buttons to close the loop.
And the desire to make everything perfect.
Yeah, this doesn't help. This doesn't help for sure.
I mean, I'm not advocating for sloppiness. Just saying a reasonable evaluation of the limits of modeling, how far it should be carried, for what purpose. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and when you can achieve something with very little effort, perfect. I mean, this is what's driving us at Abstract as well. I mean, our user interface, it's really ugly, or it's nothing special. You have an upload field, you have 3 options, and you have a download field. That's it. But I think that's how software should look like.
Mm-hmm. Well, shame on me. I haven't seen that part of your website. I must go look at it.
Yeah, well, I will share my screen later on.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, all the magic is happening in the background. The tiny little algorithms are working, so that you can drink some coffee.
Well, this is okay. Now you've come on the topic of some of the things that you do that are that I've also read in your writing. You are doing certain types of automation with people's models.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Could you talk about that then?
Yeah, sure. Back to abstraction. Yeah, we abstract architectural BIM models, so that they become useful for quantity surveyors or simulation engineers. So basically, all these engineers working with the architectural model, they have the huge problem of too much information and too inconsistent models. So they can't do anything with it, with these models. They have to manually remodel to do their calculations. And this remodeling effort we did eliminate completely. And so we create very abstract but consistent models based on the architectural input. And I think we are all always rotating about around the same topics in our conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I can't grasp it or can't put my finger on it, but it's exactly the same. It's how to make models useful for different people.
Yes. There's some transformation has to be done to them. It's not enough to have them or to perfect them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You need to normalize them, abstract them. I don't know what's the best word for it. But you need to make them useful for yourself.
And it doesn't happen by itself. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you need to know what you need. And it's like with the client. This is the most difficult work to do. You need to know what you need, and you need to be able to communicate it.
Yes. Well, I know that you have some discussion of this on your your abstract website. I'm going to go look and pay closer attention to that now. And maybe anyone who listens to this podcast will do the same.
Yeah.
And we should continue then, do this again, Simon.
Definitely.
And go into more depth on some examples of your abstraction.
Some more rambling around.
I know you're doing some unique things though, and automatically you have a system and some methods and code and such
Yeah.
that does this work on these models to make them useful.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
No,
But I'll put your contact information down in the notes where this is posted. And
yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you for the invitation.
thank you for the fantastic conversation. What a pleasure. You made my day.
Thanks, Robert.